The last one that we have here is The Hunt. Ellie follows a trail of blood to an abandoned general store. This level is presented in an unfinished pre-alpha state, reflecting its state when it was originally cut from the game. I wonder if this is another one that made it into the show that was cut from the game. Because I think it was in episode 1 where this is something that Ellie and Dina end up going to while they're out on patrol with a group and venturing into after they follow a trail of blood that led up to it. So I wonder if this cut one made it into the HBO show. Guess we'll see. What is this one like? Highlighting shaders again. Lost Levels, The Hunt.
For this third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right after the whole Seattle Abby sequence where Abby spares Ellie. And then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now? So we're coming in on Ellie, and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror,
sequence.
in a way, the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar. And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it, even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how the violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her, and she's still experiencing these PTSD moments.
Okay, well, I can see the narrative purpose in that.
Pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal.
Oh, with the boar hunt.
So this part of the story that we developed still made its way into the game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it now.
Okay, interesting. But I do kind of get the narrative purpose with that of just, like, show that she still has this violence built up, I guess.
So the boar hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on. It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right. Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone. Her hair is short. So maybe this is the future or the present. And she's hunting. Hunting who? Abby still? In early iterations
it
of the
sure
fight,
does, like,
it was more arena-like.
not making things clear.
The player slowly
just the
whittles down the
storytelling
boar's
in this
health.
game in general.
Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal, but we really needed it to do specific stuff. It needed to be able to close distances really, really quickly. It needed to charge to attack, but we wanted the feeling of hunting, so we needed to track it down from afar. And we also needed to discourage the player from attacking the boar when it's that close, or it would kind of turn into this melee kerfuffle. How do we do this in our world while keeping the boar believable?
Let's find out.
We must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range. We tried another where you're getting close and you get the jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally, we tried a bunch where you almost sort of go around a bunch of trailers and try and wrestle it. We uncovered after some time that taking down a boar over several phases felt very laborious and a little dramatic. It was comically long. It felt too boss-like, a little too gamey. We decided to cut the first few phases, and we opted for a cold open after the boar had already been hurt off screen. So that allowed us to focus on feeling like we're closing in on prey and to introduce the boar when it was most dangerous.
We're
Already
wrestling.
Hurt, already feral, much too close for comfort. And so the thinking was it would bring us more into Ellie's mindset. Is this really hunting for food, or is she hunting for some other reason?
Yeah, so I get the narrative purpose behind that. Yeah. But if we jumped off a rock and did like an Assassin's Creed air assassination or something like that,
was
it'd be
built
pretty cool.
to highlight the bore's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the bore feels larger.
Was the
We also
boar
can't
put into
track
the
it, but perhaps it's trapped with us. When it charges, it gets to us
museum
quickly,
sequence?
So we must be on our toes. This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of
So if they cut out the
hunting for
boar,
trouble mindset.
is that
Listening
why there was a
became
boar
more
in like the end of the
important, as
museum
well as moving
flashback?
around slowly so it didn't hear you. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge it away? Or is the shot worth the cost after? It feels like a gamble.
Okay.
By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles. The boar would burst and Ellie would follow it and finally enact revenge.
So then it goes to there. Looks like I don't have to reload in this version here. Take that, glass. That doesn't even shatter there. Oh, well, I have infinite ammo anyway. It would seem... Because yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a boar at the end of the museum sequence. Lots of health things
The
around.
boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious. With the boar whimpering at the back of the gas station after Ellie's relentless hunt. After this, hearing the drone that we kind of come to associate with Ellie's truck.
Oh, that cuts it off. Whatever. We get the point, I think. Okay, so this would be the cut cinematic, I guess. Unfinished state, obviously, but... Oh, okay. All right. But yeah, that's interesting. That is really cool, including some cut content in its unfinished state and giving a bit of a lens into like, hey, here's why we cut this, but this was our original idea. So, like, I absolutely do get the purpose with each of these. But yeah, that's interesting, different. Yeah, I wasn't sure how long these lost levels were going to be. I figured, like, hey, if they go on a while, then that's all the stream can be. If they're really short, then maybe I'll start No Return tonight. I guess I'm starting No Return tonight. And then after I get the feel for, like, okay, this is what it is, this is how it plays, I can go in to Mega LAN and do it and actually be like, all right, I kind of know what I'm getting into. Let's hop in there and do it. Like, I'll have the general idea. I feel like if I start it up and I want to talk about the end of Season 2, I am just going to end up getting distracted. I won't be able to gather my thoughts and stuff like that. There's all these things, but these are probably pretty long, so, like, it's... hover over them to make the new thing go away. There we go. Yeah, don't need to go through all that. And, like, all these, there's so much stuff to hover over before it stops saying that there's new stuff there. So, before I get into No Return, I think I'll just talk about it a little bit here. So, the Season 2 of the HBO show just ended earlier today. It was a 7-episode series. Season 1 for Last of Us Part 1 was 9 episodes long. And I am kind of surprised that they decided to only have Season 2 be, like, the first half of the game. It goes up to, like, the cliffhanger just before you switch over to Abby. Where I don't really feel like the plot of this game needed to be 2 separate seasons of a show. Like, they could have absolutely crammed things in to be fast enough there, because I feel like there is, like, a whole lot of stuff that could be potentially cut down in the show there. A whole lot of going from point A to point B. There's some interesting conversations and stuff like that along the way sometimes. But, you know, they could have had it be, like, maybe a 9-12 episode, something like that, season, and just, you know, just have it be a complete kind of thing and release it when that whole thing is ready. But instead, Abby's story is going to be Season 3 and then, like, the stuff that's post the cliffhanger and stuff like that. So, as I mentioned during the last stream, I did think that Episode 6, where we did, like, all the flashback stuff at once that we hadn't already done in Episode 1, plus some new things that were exclusive to the show, like the little plot that I did with Eugene, I thought that that was really good, and I liked the way that they handled the way that Ellie found out about what Joel did to the Fireflies and stuff like that, and clearly showed that there was already some conflict in their relationship before that point. Like, I really quite liked that. I felt like it was done better than the game version. With episode 7, where we're finally in Seattle day 3, this one, Ellie gets back, and Dina has an arrow through her leg because she's the one that got shot by an arrow by a Seraphite instead of Ellie, because in the game, you get shot by an arrow by a Seraphite, and then it's just kind of like the tutorial for you can pull them out, which I didn't really have to do all that much in this mode because, like, I get shot and I just kind of reset, unlike playing casually where I did have to pull out a couple arrows sometimes, and it stands to reason gameplay-wise. Oh yeah, you get shot with, like, an arrow. You pull that out, you lose some health, like, life goes on. It's a video game. But someone gets shot with an arrow in, like, a TV show, there's a greater expectation of realism. So they had Dina get shot with the arrow instead of Ellie, and she's brought back, and that is kind of a more pressing matter of, okay, we gotta get out of here. Like, we shouldn't be here anymore. I do like the plot difference with Jesse and Tommy coming out to kind of save them and bring them back, as opposed to just assist with the revenge journey. So, Seattle day 3, it's the end of day 2 after the stuff with Nora, is how the episode starts out, and Ellie gets back to the theater, and lets Jesse know that's her, says that her horse's name is Shimmer to confirm, like, she's not being held hostage or anything like that, and gets let in. We have a bit of a moment with Dina and Jesse with him removing the arrow and looking out for her and trying to show that he cares for her and stuff like that. And as he's getting that out, he realizes, as she's saying, like, hey, don't be giving me this alcohol, he offers her alcohol after he puts some on her leg where it was shot. And she refuses it, and he finds that kind of odd and kind of puts some pieces together about her being pregnant. So on Seattle day 3, Jesse's gonna head out to go get Tommy. That's the goal, is just go get Tommy, head home, kind of like it is in the game at that point, where Ellie decides, all right, I guess this is far enough. Like, at least that's what she's saying. There is an interesting difference with the show version, where it seems that in the show version, Ellie didn't actually know that Abby's group was ex-Fireflies, or didn't even really figure that until Nora confirmed that to her. And in the show version, she just completely tells Dina everything. She says, like, yeah, Salt Lake City, I was in the Firefly hospital, they were gonna make a cure, but it was gonna kill me, so Joel murderized every one of them, and that's this group that we're going after. And that's when Dina's like, oh, holy shit, like, they have understandable reasons for doing what they did. We gotta get out of here, like, this is too much. And Ellie's like, yeah, let's do so. So, when she says, like, I made her talk, and Dina asks her, did you kill her? And she says, no, I left her. Like, she was infected, she died there anyway. And Dina's like, well, I guess she got what she deserved. And Ellie's like, well, maybe she didn't. And at first I thought that meant, oh, like, does that mean, like, continuing to pursue this, like, dark path of revenge and thinking that Nora deserved worse? But no, she immediately says that this is the reason why they did what they did, and now that kind of recontextualizes the maybe she didn't to thinking that maybe she inflicted too much on someone that didn't deserve it, rather than her deserving more, is the way that it felt like that kind of recontextualized that. So their plan is to just go get Tommy and head home. They were gonna go to the rendezvous point and find him there and head on out. So Ellie and Jesse end up heading out, and Jesse takes a very, very different tone in the show version. So in the game version, he just kind of shows up as well, after trekking out on his own, after Tommy had left first, then Ellie and Dina, and then Jesse leaving afterwards. And Jesse in the game version is like, my friend's problems are my problems, and he's out here to, like, help pursue revenge until that point where he's like, all right, yeah, let's head on home, and I'll support you how I can, and stuff like that. And obviously in the game version, he prioritizes those that are still alive over getting revenge. Like, he'd rather go after Tommy and head out and stuff like that. In the show version, it is very evident that the only reason why he's there is to save his friends and bring them home. And so he kind of confronts Ellie about what's going on with Dina and asks if she's pregnant, which Ellie confirms, and he was just kind of guessing that, but it was confirmed to him. And he's telling Ellie, like, when I was helping out Dina with that arrow there, she wasn't saying I don't want to die, she was saying I can't die. Like, is she pregnant? What's going on there? And okie doke, take care there, Azzy. Off to sleep. Have a good night, everyone. Take care and have a nice upcoming week. Will do. Have a good rest of the night there. And when he was discussing that with Ellie, he was like, and she says that she can't die. Well, now I can't die either. Like, I'm about to be a father and I have responsibilities on that front. And now, because of you, we're all stuck in this active war zone here. And he's like really laying into her and criticizing her instead of, you know, the game version where he's just like, yeah, whatever, you know, I'm here to help you out and stuff like that. So he feels a lot more, you know, forcibly responsible, I guess, kind of like that. Like, he isn't afraid to say what he believes is right and is looking out for his group and stuff like that, and feels like Ellie is a bit too impulsive with the things that she does. So I thought that that was a interesting confrontation there. And then it seems like the horse wasn't forgotten about after all. I'd said that Shimmer, like, seemed like it was just forgotten in the music store before. He brings that up. He's like, yeah, we found Shimmer, and, you know, as if you even asked. So very much meant to give the impression that Ellie and Dina just kind of forgot about Shimmer, didn't really have a care because they were so focused on this revenge journey and stuff like that, that they're not even thinking about the horse anymore. But clearly Jesse was. And they get to the rendezvous point where Jesse and Tommy had, I guess, set up base before they split off and decide, like, we'll meet up back here again sometime later. And it's the bookstore. So we go to the bookstore in the game version as we have, like, some talks with Ellie and Jesse. And we have that in the show version as well, with now the excuse being, like, it's the rendezvous point to get to. So they're hanging out in the bookstore for a while, and Ellie's looking around, like, picking out books that might be good for, you know, the upcoming kid and stuff. And Jesse gives us some more backstory with his character as well. Like, so the show version gave us some more backstory with Dina's character, with, like, the backstory with her family and why she wants to, like, pursue this revenge because she can sympathize and feels like she would have done the same for her family. And we get something similar with Jesse as well. So, in terms of just, like, backstory, that is. Not necessarily, you know, stuff with his family in the past. And he tells Ellie, like, you know, I do truly love Dina, but not like you do. I love her in a different way there, like a way that it seems like probably isn't going to work out long term, is the way that it kind of sounded like. So, like, he has some care there, but might not be meant for one another. And he tells his story about how he had met this girl that was passing through when their family was passing through. Apparently they had come from Alberta, which I'm sure is a little bit of a nod to the fact that season 1 was filmed here in Alberta. And that she was selling all these paintings along the way, and he said that they weren't really all that good at all, but he bought 4 because he had that feeling like there was some chemistry between them, and there was a thing going on between them during the time that they had stayed in Jackson, but they had to keep on going to Mexico, and she wasn't willing to stay in Jackson and abandon her family, and he had thought about going along with her on this journey and, you know, spending his life that way, but decide that he should stick behind because he cares about the people in Jackson, with them taking him in and supporting him and making him a member of the community, and he wants to repay that and be able to look out for them. And I feel like that was very indicative of his character kind of putting others before himself and his own wants. And Ellie's kind of giving him some shit for it in the show. She's like, oh, well, it's Saint Jesse of Jackson or whatever she called him. And he says, like, you know, you can make fun of me if you want, but if I wasn't out here saving you, like, where would you be right now? Especially considering in the show version, she is in the middle of getting completely mauled by a bunch of stalkers before he comes and shoots them down, so she would have been dead without him, and, you know, he kind of draws attention to that, which I thought was interesting. Then the radio goes off, they hear about the sniper, which we presume is Tommy, and they're like, all right, well, time to rush out. We're not sticking at the rendezvous point. We're going after Tommy. So both of them start going after Tommy. I forget if this is before or after the bookstore, but there's also a sequence where they see that there's, like, a kerfuffle going on, and so they hide behind some dumpsters, and they see that there's a Seraphite that is alone getting hounded by a bunch of WLF soldiers, like a very young Seraphite person. Ellie refers to him as just a kid. Kind of the way that Lev is referred to with Abby's story, so maybe some parallels that are meant to be drawn there. And we actually have a moment where Ellie is meant to be sympathized with a little bit more, rather than just being, like, stuck on this, you know, single-minded journey of revenge, it seems like. Because as the WLF soldiers are kind of hounding this guy and stripping him down of all his clothes and dragging him away, she wants to step in and try to save him after she sees this. But Jesse stops her and says, like, there's 6 of them, 2 of us. Like, what do you expect was going to happen there? Besides, this isn't our war. Like, let these 2 groups continue killing one another. And Ellie is kind of not all that impressed with that. So, when they get to this skyscraper, which is kind of the equivalent of the area with the boat scene in the game, that's when Ellie sees the aquarium, which in the show version, all Nora had said was whale and wheel, because apparently she was, succumbing to the infection and pain and couldn't really think straight and stuff like that. And she wasn't sure what whale and wheel meant and thought that maybe the trail had gone cold on Abby because of that. But from this high point, as Jesse's scanning around to see how they can reach this sniper that they presume is Tommy, she sees the whale and the wheel and is like, hey, we have to go after Abby. And in the game version, she makes the argument that, hey, Tommy's probably going to be going there because he's going after Abby. In the show version, she makes very clear that she just wants to go after Abby at this point and has no intention of going after Tommy. And instead of them having just like these different priorities and then Jesse saying, I really hope you make it and leaving, Ellie gets really, really pissed off at Jesse for his hypocrisy, saying like, hey, you say that you just look after your community, but what about other people like that Seraphite kid that you let get dragged away and stuff like that? Was it because he wasn't part of your community? Well, I had my community beaten in front of me while I watched, and I have the chance to, go get revenge here, and you won't act on that. And Jesse also reveals that in the vote in Jackson for sending out a squad on this revenge journey, he had actually voted no, when the show before had you presume that he had likely voted yes to sending out a squad there. But after Ellie's like, well, we would have had like a full squad in your support going out to kill her right now if we had just had like 1 or 2 people more vote yes. And he's like, well, I actually voted no because I didn't think that it was in the best interest of the community. And I know that the way that you'll get and, act impulsively and rashly and stuff like that, which, to be fair, that is very much what Ellie does there. So that's when she kind of really lays into him for looking after his own community, but not other people's community, she feels like. And then that's when he's like, I really hope you make it, and leaves to go after Tommy, and Ellie goes to go after Abby in the aquarium. So as she's getting closer, we do have a scene with her seeing a boat and seeing some people kind of loading up there. We don't have to fight anybody in the show version to get to the boat, but we do see a bunch of boats coming together and setting out to the Seraphite Island. So we actually get to see the attack on the Seraphite Island start in Ellie's story in the show version, something that we weren't even aware of in Ellie's story in the game version. So we see Isaac and his squad roll up and load up their boats and head out. And we also got another Isaac scene earlier in the show, so we already have like monumentally more Isaac scenes. I think we're at 4 now, total scenes with him. Double the game had in Ellie's story alone. Never mind Abby's story, where he's going to be more important. And the earlier one I thought was kind of interesting. The earlier one has like one of his like higher ups kind of talking to him about like, hey, we're still missing Abby and we're still missing Owen, and now Mel's missing too. Like, what's going on with that? And Isaac's like, what the hell? Why is Abby missing on this like super important day? That really sucks. And the one lady is like, well, at least we still have Manny. I kind of laughed at that, thinking that Manny's probably dead by Tommy. Like, maybe he doesn't die in the show version. We'll have to find out with season 3. But yeah, at least we still have Manny. Everyone loves Manny. And Isaac's like, we have so many Mannys, we have so many Owens, we have so many Mels, but we only have one Abby. And his general or higher up or whatever the heck is like, what the heck is going on? You got like a crush on her or something? What's going on here? And he explains that he expects on this island and this big battle that a lot of people are going to be losing their lives, and there's a good chance of like him included is probably going to die on that island. So who's going to assume leadership afterwards, considering he feels that his people are just sheep and need someone to follow, and he wanted Abby to be his successor. Something that we don't really see in the game version. And that kind of explains, like, their kind of one-on-one connection in the game version, where it's like, okay, is she just, like, one of his super high-ranked generals? Is there something else going on here? What kind of role did she have within the WLF? Like, what's going on here? The show reveals that apparently he intended her to be his successor if something would come of him. So he had a lot of importance on her role because of that. So we have that, and we see Isaac and his buddies, like, heading out to the Seraphite Island. There's just, like, a boat that's left unattended, so Ellie gets onto that and starts sailing towards the aquarium. a big wave is coming, and like an idiot, she veers off to the side and takes the wave from the side instead of going head on. So she gets washed away from that. And I thought that she would wash up on the shore of the aquarium and it might be closer to the game version. Here's where the show does something very different. Instead, in the show, she ends up washing up on the Seraphite Island, where the WLF attack is going on. There's like a little Seraphite kid that sees her, and she's like, you know, kind of delirious and confused after washing up on the island. The kid darts off, and as she's, you know, regaining her senses, a couple adult Seraphites come on down, pick her up, and drag her away. And they drag her to a noose very similar to the scene that we get with Abby in the game, where she's put into a noose. There's a Seraphite soldier, like, getting ready to, you know, cut her open. And I was like, what the heck? Is this Ellie's story or Abby's story? What's going on here? And it seems that, like, this tiny little child is the one that had told the adults about where she was. And she's trying to say, like, I'm not a wolf. I'm not one of them. I'm not from around here. They don't believe her. And as she's tied up, this tiny little child does, like, a slit and thumbs down thing to say kill her. This tiny little kid. And I guess, like, maybe that's meant to show parallels to the fact that she wanted to save a kid earlier who was a decent bit older, saying, like, you know, he's just a kid, we should have gone and helped him. And then this tiny little child condemns her to death on that side to show, like, oh, well, you know, maybe there's some good ones and there's some bad ones, or, you know, maybe that would kind of shift her view about the Seraphites, and maybe it would be a similar situation for the WLF soldiers, where maybe there was, like, some good Seraphites that they'd meet, but then they'd meet some, like, nutter ones that really wanted to murderize them, and that's why they'd have this animosity or something. I don't know. But they were gonna kill her, but before they do it, they get, like, whistles that say that their village is under attack. So they're like, oh, crap, we can't kill her now, let's just leave her, and, like, whatever. And they don't even leave her tied up or anything like that. She's held up by, like, one person just holding the rope. So, like, they don't tie that up or anything like that. They just drop her and are like, yeah, well, I guess you could just go free then. Let's go defend the village. And they don't have any time to worry about that. So, she's on the ground and she goes back to her boat, and then she takes the boat to the aquarium. And as she's driving the boat away, we do see flames erupt on the Seraphite Island that imply that the boats that Isaac and his men took there launched an attack. There was never anything directly said about them launching an attack on the Seraphite Island, but from them, like, gathering all their forces together, him saying, like, where the heck is Abby and all that, and then you're seeing, like, all the boats go to the island, you're hearing the village is under attack and seeing flames erupt, you can kind of figure out what went on there. So I found it interesting how this show made sure to show during Ellie's story that there was this big thing going on between the WLF and the Seraphites, and, like, the big climax of that was on Seattle Day 3 that we just didn't really get in the game version. Yeah, so we're kind of discussing the show here since episode 7 just aired. So then she makes it to the aquarium, just like in the game, and has to sneak in, and similar way we go in from the roof and sneak through until we find Owen and Mel. In the show version, there is no Alice to kill. There is no doggo anymore. So, like, hey, at least Ellie doesn't kill a doggo in this version. And in the game version, after she's saying, like, hey, point on the map where Abby is, and she ends up getting attacked by Mel and Owen. In the show version, they're saying, like, hey, we don't know where Abby is. Ellie's like, bullshit, I just heard you talking about her. And, you know, starts counting down to say, like, when she's gonna shoot them if they don't show where it is on the map. And one of the comments I found kind of interesting was when Owen's saying, like, well, how can we trust you? Like, we're gonna be dead either way. Like, we tell you and you'll just kill us anyway. And Ellie says, no, I won't, because I'm not like you. Which I thought was kind of an interesting comment, because in the show version, we got something similar with Abby, where Abby was saying to Joel that she wasn't like him, like, she has morals. And that's kind of what Ellie was now doing to Owen and Mel, by saying, like, I'm not like you, implying that they're just kind of monsters, the way that Abby was implying to Joel in the show version. So I thought that that was kind of interesting. As Owen's going for the map, he tries to quickly pick up a gun. He gets immediately shot through the neck, and in the show version, Ellie gets a double kill. So instead of stabbing Mel, like, as she comes at her with a knife, turns out the bullet that killed Owen also killed Mel. She just gets a friggin' twofer shot. And then, you know, Mel's bleeding out, and that's when she reveals she's pregnant. She's like, please cut out the baby, and Ellie doesn't know how to do that, doesn't know what to do here, gets completely overwhelmed by the moment, and just, you know, doesn't do anything, and Mel bleeds out. And that's when Jesse and Tommy find her there, and they head out. And Tommy's kind of comforting her, saying, like, hey, they made their decisions, like, this is just what happened. So I thought that that was a interesting kind of difference, and showed that Ellie did at first want to help save Mel's baby, but just got, like, completely overwhelmed and, you know, very disgusted with herself and didn't know what to do there. But, like, killing Mel was very, very much an accident in this case. After Owen was shot, I was like, okay, is Mel just gonna stand there? Is she gonna attack as well? What's gonna be the reason that Ellie kills Mel at this point? And then, like, you know, camera pans out and we see that she's bleeding out, and it's like, oh, okay, never mind, it's a double kill situation. There was no map that Ellie had this time to get conveniently dropped on the floor for Abby to find and track her down. So I don't know how Abby finds her in the show version. I guess we'll have to wait until season 3 to find that out. But yeah, there's no map marking her location that's dropped unless, you know, season 3 ends up writing that in, and we just didn't see it in the show version here with season 2. So we're back to the theater, and we get, like, some of the discussions that we had with in the game version, where Tommy's like, yeah, will you be able to make peace with Abby getting to live? And Ellie's saying, like, yeah, I guess I have to. So we did have some similar things there. Yeah, so Ellie did know that Abby is the daughter of the doctor. It seems like in the show version, she only found out as of Nora telling her on Seattle Day 2. In the show version, she directly says, like, Joel killed everyone in that hospital, including Abby's dad, who was the doctor who was going to operate on me. So she directly says that. So she does indeed know, and she does get the motivation, which is why Dina kind of shifts her perspective to, like, okay, we gotta get out of here. Like, it seems like they had their reasons. We've done enough. Let's just skedaddle out of here. And Ellie seems to agree at first, but then clearly isn't satisfied with that and still wants to keep on going after Abby, which she doesn't find. And yeah, end of Seattle Day 3. We end up having that same thing as the game, but this time we have a little bit of a one-on-one conversation with Ellie and Jesse. And Ellie is like, hey, you know, thanks for actually coming back for me. And Jesse's like, well, what if I didn't want to? What if Tommy made me? And Ellie's like, he didn't, did he? And Jesse's like, no, he didn't. And Ellie's like, well, that's because you're a good guy. And they're talking about how, you know, he wants to look out for others and stuff. And he says, like, I want to go and do that for you because I know that if I was in trouble, you would burn the whole earth to try and help me. And Ellie's like, yeah, I would. And then that's where you hear, like, the kerfuffle of Abby showing up and, you know, going after Tommy and stuff. Ellie and Jesse end up barging through the door, and Jesse dies in the same way as the game version, where the moment he comes out of the doors, he gets immediately shot in the head. And so right after that conversation about Jesse being a good guy and stuff, he's immediately killed for, like, that very quick kind of parallel situation. So I did kind of like that that moment with Jesse just before that point. Has a little bit more shock value, I guess, when we're just reflecting on this path and everything, and now all of a sudden we're reminded of, like, the cost of the path and stuff. So, you know, he's killed in the same way, but there's a little bit more stuff going into it with the conversation that we just had. And then in the show version, when Abby's like, get up, Abby's like, all right. She throws the gun away immediately and stands up and is like, hey, I'm the one you want. Tommy's not the one that killed all your friends, it was me, and I'm the one that Joel saved to, like, by murdering all the people in the hospital. I'm the one that you want. So, sort of similar to the game version there. But yeah, served your purpose, get shot. Yeah, it's kind of how it feels like with a couple characters in this story, like Jesse, Manny. There's definitely a couple instances of that. But here is an instance where I feel like the show version is much, much worse than the game version. So it does end on almost the exact same cliffhanger. So in the game version, Abby's pointing her gun at Ellie and is like, we spared your life and you wasted it. And then it cuts to black. And then you have to do Seattle Day 1, 2, and 3 as Abby. In the show version, there's that exact same line of, like, we spared your lives and you wasted it, as she's pointing the gun. But in the show version, it then cuts to Ellie screaming, and then it cuts to black as you hear a gunshot. So, like, the show version directly implies that she just shot Ellie and killed her. So the game version just implies she's at gunpoint. Oh no, what's she gonna do now? Is she going to kill them? Is there gonna be, like, some sort of confrontation? The show version just implies that Abby killed Ellie without showing it. So it makes it even more of a brutal cliffhanger than the game version had. And even more of a brutal cliffhanger when the fact that we're dealing with like seasons of a show, and it's gonna be like another year or two before season 3 comes out. So people that are experiencing the story for the first time through the show are left on this brutal cliffhanger where they're like, what? Did Abby just kill Ellie? So I don't remember from the game version like what that gunshot would have been. Would that have been like Dina like shooting and causing the kerfuffle where, or maybe that's Tommy that shot or something like that? All I know is like the kerfuffle starts and then like Tommy's adventuring days are over when he gets an arrow to the knee and then a gunshot to the eye, and then like the boss battle begins. I don't remember how the kerfuffle actually begins, how we get away from that like held at gunpoint kind of moment there, whether it's Dina shooting or what it was. I don't remember exactly. But I presume in the show version that'll probably be Dina shooting most likely, and then starting the whole kerfuffle across Abby, Lev, and Abby and Dina, Ellie and Dina probably. But it's such a brutal cliffhanger. The show doesn't end right there. Instead, it ends now with like the opening of Abby's segment. So right after we have that like gunshot scream and cut to black, we immediately have Abby waking up on the couch, like magazine on the face. She gets up and does a stretch or something, I don't remember, and then walks out to see the whole WLF compound in the stadium there and is looking out over the area. And then the text comes up, Seattle, day 1. And then it cuts to black, and then we get the credits to roll. So, me watching the show was how I was able to experience the first Last of Us story for the first time. Like, I watched the show before I played the game. This time I've played the game before watching the show. But I can only imagine that if the show was my first experience, I would have been so freaking pissed off. Like, both the cliffhanger of, what, did she just shoot Ellie? And then we also find out immediately that we now know that season 3 is not going to lead with what happens at that instance. We are instead doing Seattle day 1 to 3 all over again, but now from Abby's perspective. So I can only imagine that people experiencing the story for the first time through the show are probably going to be really pissed right now, and it'll be really interesting to see what people are saying online about the story, like what the critics are saying, what general audiences are saying, and which direction reviews are going to go. Now that ended on that ludicrously brutal cliffhanger that I argue is like one of the biggest issues with the story, and the show only made that even worse. I would argue here. Another one of the issues that I took with the story in general is just that like Ellie's and Abby's stories don't really have a connection between them. They're doing like their own completely different plots, and then they only just happen to like run into one another right at the end. So even though Abby's story has like a lot of symbolic connections to Ellie's story, it doesn't really have any literal connections, as you only find out like, oh, it looks like Ellie's here has been murdering all my friends this whole time. You just kind of suddenly find out that at the end. So that's one of the things that I can bring up now that all of season 2 is done and we've seen all of like Ellie's adventure in Seattle. That's one of the things that the show didn't change. There is absolutely no presence of Abby during Ellie's story in Seattle until that final confrontation, just like the game version. So I do kind of wish that that was something that the game had changed, but it does seem like we are sticking true to like all the main notes of the game's story, but still changing some things. So there are some things that I definitely did enjoy about the game story more, like with the tone of seriousness that there was with the whole revenge plot, as opposed to the show version where it just felt like Ellie and Dina were going on like a fun happy-go-merry field trip at times and goofing around and having fun. Like, I feel like it didn't really set the tone super well with what was going on there a lot of the time. I felt like the tone with the game version suited the atmosphere a lot better. Or things with like the whole Nora chase sequence in the show version and like the line delivery and stuff there, which I had felt was sloppy. So there are some parts of the game that I prefer. Like, or the fact that the cliffhanger, it's pretty brutal in both, but like I would argue it's worse in the show version when it implies that Ellie died. But for the most part, I do think I like the show version better. I think that it established a much clearer relationship between Ellie and Joel, as opposed to the game version where it's like, oh, do these guys hate one another? Is there still some like there? Is she going out just for revenge, or is there something like more deep-seated here? There's something here that the audience doesn't know yet, as I thought it was for a long time. The game led me on to believe that, and it turned out that just wasn't the case. I feel like if I was watching the show as my first exposure to this story, I wouldn't have had that misconception with like the way that they had established Joel and Ellie's relationship with episode 1 and 2. Like, there wasn't all the pieces there yet. There was still the stuff to be shown in episode 6. But I feel like I don't think that the flashbacks really do this much service, where it's like, oh, okay, so like they did hate each other after all. Oh wait, never mind. They did have a complicated relationship but still had love for one another, as you find out at the end. Like, I feel like the flashbacks, the way that they were handled in the game version, detract from it. I feel like they actually added to the story in the show version with the way that they handled it. So like episode 1 and 2 actually feels like it gives us enough context to show like, hey, there's clearly like some ill feelings toward Joel from Ellie, but like she still wants to spend time with him. If she has the option, she wants to go on patrols with Joel. Like, she might be, you know, kind of pushing him away and seemingly having some ill feelings here, but she establishes that, hey, things are complicated, but I still want to be able to work things out here. So it's made very clear in the show version. And then with doing like Seattle Day 1 and 2, and then the whole collective flashbacks that shows everything with the Joel situation, with that episode basically ending with the, I don't think I can ever forgive you for this, but I think I'd like to try, having it at that moment instead of like right at the end of the game, right before the credits roll. We then have like a better context for her choosing to go after Abby rather than going after Tommy in that sequence, because you now see that like, hey, there was some complicated stuff between them that resulted in this complicated relationship, but there was still some love and genuine care there. When we get that super important line of like, I think I'd like to forgive you and stuff, and see that they do still mean a lot to one another, that we see like really reflected in episode 6, despite there being some complications there. So when there's like the split off between her and Jesse, and her giving like the whole spiel about her community being brutally taken away in front of her, we really, really get it, as opposed to the game version where, again, I was like, is it just revenge, or is there something different going on here, since we don't understand the true nature of her and Joel's relationship until the freaking end of the game, right before the credits roll. So I feel like the way that they handle the flashbacks in the game version honestly had the story shooting itself in the foot. I feel like the way that they were handled in the show version, where it's just like, hey, here's all the stuff that you need to know in episode 1 and 2, and really establishes that it's a complicated relationship, but they still care about one another. We go on this revenge journey, and then like right before the climax of that journey, we have like the rest of the relationship where it's like, okay, things were complicated and weird, but there was like some very serious love there, and you can feel that in her continuing that pursuit with that final decision of, I'm prioritizing this revenge journey over those that are still alive, like Tommy. So it feels like it kind of leads up to that a little bit better. Words are hard. That's my opinion. It'd be a lot easier to gather my thoughts if I was doing this like a video essay and had like a script where I could write stuff down and really think things through, but just live unprompted here, this is the stuff that comes to mind. So, like I said, definitely some things that I preferred about the game version, storytelling-wise. But, for the most part, the show does feel a lot better. I was really hoping they wouldn't end it in the way that they did with the cliffhanger. So I was really surprised when they did, you know, same cliffhanger, but even more brutal by implying Ellie's death. So there are definitely some very major issues that I take with the show version as well. But for the most part, I found it to be a much more enjoyable storytelling experience and much more clear than the game version, where I'm constantly asking myself about like character motivations. Like, character motivations can be an interesting thing to unpack if done in an interesting way, I feel like. But if the game is implying to me that there's something even more deep than what it seems like is going on at face value, but then the way that it subverts your expectation is like, nope, it's just the way that it is at face value, that's not really super interesting, I find. So yeah, I did enjoy Season 2 for the most part. I appreciate the follow there, Tarmagoth. We'll see what Season 3 holds, whether that's coming out next year or the year after. I don't know if they've already done filming, if they filmed like Season 2 and 3 back-to-back, or what exactly is going on. I think that it has been interesting to talk about this, because I think it's really fun to analyze like very complicated and nuanced kind of stories. So I could see myself coming back to stream some more Last of Us Part 2 after a bunch of Season 3 is out, or / all of Season 3 is out, just so I can talk about that as a whole, and then do like a little bit of more no-return content at that point. But this is as many episodes as there are for now, so I don't know when that's going to be. And that's basically my thoughts on Season 2. I did quite like it. It had some issues of its own, but I thought it was a lot better than the game story, is what I thought here. So, yeah, there's my full review of Last of Us Season 2. If someone that wasn't at all familiar with the stories asked me, like, if I'd recommend watching the show, I would recommend waiting until Season 3 is out, and then watching through the show, is what I think I would do. As is, and leaving off on that cliffhanger, I can only imagine how pissed people would be with the implications of that cliffhanger. So, yeah, there's that. I think that was everything I wanted to say about Season 2, and if there's anything else I remember, I'll just talk about it sometime later when I'm doing No Return, like a Mega LAN or something like that.